Yeah, you've given me a chair.
I know, it's a bit erect.
Where it is impossible to lounge. I think that was unsporting of you.
I know. Are you comfortable?
The next time I do the podcast, I want a chaise long, please. I don't think it's only fair.
Hello and welcome to Chopper's Brexit podcast, coming to you live from the Conservative Party Commons in Manchester. I'm Christopher Hope, the Telegraph's chief political correspondent. And for those who don't know, my nickname is Chopper. It's only day 2 of the Tory Party conference, and already billions of pounds of your money has been spent on hospitals and infrastructure as though this party is going to govern for 5 more years. But all anyone can talk about in Manchester is Brexit, and if Boris Johnson can survive maybe 3 more weeks. The party's slogan is Get Brexit Done. But can he? So today, live on the Telegraph's website and live here at the party conference in Manchester, we're staging the battle for Brexit that's dominating the talk of this conference away from the platforms. Leave versus Remain, the rumble in the marquee. And my guests are 2 politicians who personify that divide. Jacob Rees-Mogg, leader of the House of Commons, and David Gauke, former Tory cabinet minister and leader of the so-called Gaukewood squad of former Tory MPs who were thrown out of the party for defying the whip on a no-deal Brexit. If you're tweeting today, please use the hashtag Choppers Brexit Podcast, and there'll be time for each guest to answer questions after I've had a go. Now, my first guest is Jacob Rees-Mogg. You first became an MP, Jacob, in 2010. You've increased your majority every election since. Now you're leader of the House of Commons. Jacob, welcome to the Marquee and Chopper's Brexit podcast. Are you all hooked up yet? Can we hear you?
I can speak, but I'm not sure you can hear me if you're not in this room.
Yes, no, they can. Yes,
they can. Well, the room can, because they've all got good hearing.
And on the internet, they can hear you
too. Can they hear me on the internet?
Yes.
Oh, amazing technology.
Now, Jacob, why do you love Brexit? What is it about Brexit that makes you get up in the morning?
Well, I get up in the morning anyway. I don't get up exclusively for Brexit, or for that matter, breakfast, because I tend not to have breakfast. But it's all about democracy. That was what it was all about in the referendum, and what it's been about as our concerns with the European Union have grown over the decades. Can you, through your vote, change how you are governed? And the more competencies that went to the European Union, the fewer things you could change by how you voted. And we needed to get that back. So democracy was everything, and all the other arguments were essentially subsets of democracy. What if you had control, could you then do? Not that this is why we're voting for Brexit.
And what do you make of the uproar last week in the House of Commons about the Ben Act being called a surrender act by your boss, Boris Johnson?
The Surrender Act, the Capitulation Act,
Humiliation Act.
Humiliation Act. It is all of these things. I think there's a deliberate attempt by the left to object to language because they've lost the argument. Now, the hypocrisy of it is shocking. You have John McDonnell, who said that Esther McVey should be lynched. Lynched. You know, that's not saying a surrender act. That is calling for physical violence. And that's what the hard left is like. We mustn't pretend, because Jeremy Corbyn appears an avuncular figure, that the hard left doesn't have a very nasty edge to it. And the abuse that some MPs, particularly female MPs, get on Twitter, threatening violence and rape and killing, is outrageous, illegal, and should be prosecuted.
But it wasn't treated as such in the House last week. Boris Johnson
it's not true.
Battered away as humbug.
No, that's not right. You need to listen to what had been said. Yes,
I was in the chamber listening to it.
Yeah, absolutely, but clearly not very carefully, because the MP for Dewsbury mentioned Joe Cox, and then went on in a sort of rant, generally. And that was the bit that was humbug, not the death of Joe Cox, an enormously serious event in our recent political history.
Tragic.
And tragic, desperately tragic. And we all remember seeing her poor children. And the hardship for them is unbearable. But using language like the surrender bill doesn't lead to murder. Suggesting people should be lynched may do. And we've got to recognise that we mustn't let the left shut down free speech and political debate because they're losing the argument. So yes, call it the surrender bill, call it the surrender bill again, and call it the surrender bill again. But if you say people should be lynched, expect to be prosecuted.
Have you apologised to the Queen, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for misleading her about the need for prorogation? You went up there, you flew up there, didn't you, by BA, and then you asked her to prorogue, and then it was found to be unlawful by the courts.
Well, conversations between Privy Councillors and their sovereign are confidential, as you know, and as a requirement of the Privy Councillor's oath. And having only become a Privy Councillor fairly recently, I'm not going to have the first thing I do is to break that oath.
Isn't she required an apology from the government, though?
I don't think the government did anything wrong. I don't think the advice was wrong. I don't think anybody would have thought it was wrong until the Supreme Court ruled as it did. The Attorney General thought it was proper advice. It is perfectly proper and reasonable to do things that then a court takes a different view of. That's how many decisions are come to. So I don't think there is any requirement for an apology. And bear in mind, the Lord President of Council does not advise the Queen.
No, but you were there asking for the prorogation in
No, I wasn't asking for the prorogation.
No.
The way the Privy Council works is that the Lord President of the Council, that's me, reads out what is going to happen and the Queen says approved. There's no more than that. It's not. We don't sit around having a cup of tea, chatting, saying, well, Your Majesty, what do you think about this? Oh, that Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, you know, quite. This vision of the Privy Council is false.
So imagine these wonderful people aren't here. It's you and me talking. No one's listening.
Yeah.
Right. How do you get out?
Look, I'm much more likely to confide in these wonderful
than me,
Tory members and Telegraph readers than a public figure of your stature.
Not a public figure, please. You and me talking, they're not here. How do you get out by the end of October and not break the law?
Just not out of this warm tent.
No. Out of the European Union.
Out of the European Union. Well, the most obvious way is with a deal. If we get a deal, it is provided for that we leave the Benn Act falls away.
Of course.
And that is what the government is aiming for. That is government policy.
But how do you get out and not breach the law which requires Boris to write a letter on October the 19th saying he wants to delay until January 31st or whenever?
There are legal requirements and the government will always obey the law.
Yes.
But the question of Article 50 and its exercise is not entirely a UK matter. We must challenge the Remoaners because those of them who say they want to take no deal off the table actually don't want to leave. They are all people who voted Remain. They've always backed Remain and they are very committed to the European Union. And they use their attack on no deal as code. But they should show us the colour of their money. If this is what they really believe, they should vote in the House of Commons to revoke our withdrawal from the European Union and see if that has a majority in Parliament or in the country. I very much doubt it. And they shouldn't use parliamentary prestidigitation to try and avoid standing up for what they really believe.
Okay. What happens? You may clap. Clapping's allowed.
Thank you.
Are we heading for an almighty collision with the courts in those final 10 days of October? Well, let's assume that you don't write the letter, the PM doesn't, or...
I'm not making any assumptions about the courts. But I think where we are going to end up is in a general election. This has to be decided in a general election in the normal constitutional way. And then we will see what happens, that we have a completely dysfunctional parliament. It cannot get anything done. And the Fixed Term Parliament Act was one of the most stupid acts of Parliament put on the statute book because it goes against the grain of the Constitution. We don't have a US system where the executive and the legislature are in a state of semi-hostility towards each other all the time. We have an executive that comes out of the legislature and therefore needs to maintain the confidence of the legislature. What we have at the moment is pretended confidence that the House of Commons won't pass anything the government proposes, but won't vote for a general election. And this is creating a very unstable situation.
The feeling in the Commons is acrimonious. Do you think MPs can ever come back together again?
No, of course. The feeling in the Commons, the whole structure of the House of Commons is to ensure that matters are debated forcefully. That's been its structure for centuries. And if you have any doubts about this, look at Disraeli's speeches on Peel. They were much ruder than anything anybody's been saying in the House of Commons recently. The further you go back in history, the worse the behaviour was, and I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Do you have any regrets over your conduct during Brexit? On Brexit?
On Brexit, what are you thinking about?
Well, you voted for MV3, which a lot of readers, members think was a massive mistake.
Yeah, I did indeed, and my infant sister, who is wise about all things, thought I had made a
now
mistake.
an MEP.
Nunziata, the most distinguished member of the European Parliament ever sent by the United Kingdom.
The longest name, certainly.
And the best.
And the best.
And I rarely disagree with Annunziata, who is wise and good, but I came to the conclusion that the risk of losing Brexit altogether, if we didn't accept a bad deal, was high. And people I respect said, well, actually, it would be better not to leave than to take a really rotten deal. And I thought that was wrong. I thought it was better to take a bad deal, get a new leader, and actually change it. Because once you're out, the legal position is so much better than whilst you are still in. You are a free, sovereign nation. And lots of international treaties get signed and then 10 years later, 20 years later, fade into the mists of time and cease to have the importance that they had when made. Whereas the legal structure that made us subject to a superior law coming from a foreign power was permanent. And therefore, we need to leave legally. That must be the overriding priority.
Yeah.
So no, under the circumstances of the time, I don't regret voting for MB3.
If you don't get Brexit done by October 31st, will you resign?
Well, we will get Brexit done by October 31st. We will. I mean, these hypotheticals become absurd. I've only just been appointed, and the first thing you're asking me to do is resign. I mean, in a few weeks.
I'm a journalist, Jacob.
All right.
Should the Whipless 21, one of whom is on the podcast shortly, should they be allowed back into the party?
Well, you've given me an opening to say that I think David Gauke is a credit to the Conservative Party, somebody I've admired for years, was an incredibly important and wonderful minister, and I think he deserves a round of applause from this Conservative audience.
Well, we're coming up with that.
And when I was first elected, if ever there was a difficult question that the then Chancellor didn't want to answer from Ed Balls, it was David who went out and answered it, and his performances at the dispatch box made you proud to be a Conservative.
But should he be allowed back in?
I'm very sorry that he is not formally in receipt of the whip. It is difficult. The Prime Minister said it was a vote of confidence, and is there a way of coming back? Well, perhaps that's a question David can answer when you question him. We need to be a broad church as a party. There is no exclusivity of knowledge and rightness on one wing of the party, but there has to be some discipline within the party too. And you may fairly say to me, well, look, I voted against the government, and indeed I did. Not as much as people normally say, but I did from 2010 onwards vote against the government, but never on a vote of confidence, never on something that historically would have been seen as a vote of confidence. And votes of confidence are different. And it did hand over the order paper to Jeremy Corbyn. And I'm afraid I think that was the wrong thing to have done.
And if ERG members, you're a former chairman of the ERG until the beginning of this month, I think, weren't you? If they vote against the deal if a deal comes about, should they also be sacked and lose the whip?
Well, if people vote against the government on a vote of confidence, they would expect to lose.
Which is defined by the government.
Which is defined by the government. So we'll have to see whether it is a vote of confidence.
And just finally, to go back to Camilla's question on your lounging on the front bench,
you've given me a chair.
I know, it's a bit erect.
Where it is impossible to lounge. I think that was unsporting of you.
I know. Are you comfortable?
The next time I do the podcast, I want a chaise long, please. I mean, I think it's only fair. Look, I will... amongst this very distinguished audience, I will admit that lounging was a mistake. It's how I'd always sat on the back benches. It is very traditional, and a sympathetic correspondent from Canada wrote to me to say that when the chamber had been rebuilt after the war, Churchill had insisted that the table and the front bench were closer together than the original plan, so that people on the front bench could put their feet on the table, which went on until the cameras came. And I thought it was traditional and therefore right, which is a good general principle. But I think in retrospect it detracted from important matters.
Right, that's all from me. Any questions from our brilliant audience here? Hands in the air, please. Lady in the middle here, Sarah's got the microphone. Thank you, Sarah. And if you say who you are, please, madam. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Ria. I'm a young Conservative.
Hi, Ria.
I just want to ask... considering there have been so many constitutional fiascos surrounding Brexit, and you say that constitutionally you'll act as right as you can as an executive, how can you do this if there is no guidance? And essentially, do you think there is a need for a codified constitution upon the events which have occurred in the last few weeks?
Thank you, Ria.
I hope that's not the conclusion that we come to, though I think it's a very important question and people will start discussing this. I've been a great admirer of Mr. Speaker, which I know is not a common view in Conservative circles, because I
one booed.
No, well, I think he did a lot of good work to increase the ability of members of Parliament to hold the executive to account. And shortly before I got into government, I was campaigning to get a drug for a constituent of mine who suffers from Batten disease. And the Speaker was unbelievably helpful. He called me at health questions. He gave me an adjournment debate. He gave me an urgent question. He allowed me to use all the methods that can be used by a backbencher to put pressure on the government. And that's really important because seeking redress of grievance is the most ancient responsibility of the House of Commons. It goes all the way back to 1265. Yes, but in the last year, and the lady asks about the codification, well, there's Erskine May. And Erskine May is completely clear on all sorts of matters, and the Speaker woke up in the morning and decided to do something else. And that is a real, real problem, because a year ago I thought I knew how Commons business was meant to run. Turned out I didn't, but nor did the clerks, because what had been assumed to be the standard forms and was based on precedent was suddenly and randomly and erratically overturned. And that has been a real problem, and I think we need to go back to observing the norms. I think the reforms made by Tony Blair to the judiciary, the House of Lords, and bringing in a Supreme Court, is having a natural consequence between the courts and Parliament. And the question is that what was intended? And it is making our system more American and is giving greater influence to the judiciary, and that may be a good thing or it may not, but it's certainly different.
And do you want a codified document?
I don't want a codified document because one of the great strengths of our Constitution is its uncodified nature, its flexibility. And if you look at the problems with the United States Constitution, I think there are two great constitutions in the world, actually, our Constitution and the US Constitution. And the faults of one and the other are mirror images, that their fault is it's too rigid and ours is that it's too flexible. But I would rather stick with ours and get it back on track rather than adopt the American
And was it a coup by the judges? With
Who
their ruling?
said that?
Reportedly, you did on a conference call last Friday.
What, in a cabinet meeting? Is the Telegraph really trying to preempt the... Clearly, somebody doesn't want me to say what I'm about to say.
That's Dominic Cummings pulling his microphone.
That's right. The cabinet minutes are released after 30 years, so this young audience will just have to wait.
But do you think it was a coup?
I'll find out. The government's position is that
it's a party event.
We respect the judges, but don't agree with their judgment. That's a perfectly legitimate point to take.
Okay. And just finally, Jacob Rees-Mogg, what are the odds on leaving the EU at the end of next month?
Better than Somerset winning the county championship, which was what I was asked the last time I appeared before the Telegraph.
So they lost, by the way. They just lost to Essex.
Yes. So I think leaving is now the Essex option.
Is it odds on?
I think we will leave on 31st of October.
Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Thank you. You're kind. Thank you very much.
Hello, Chopper listeners. My name's Danny Boyle, and I'm the Telegraph's commuter editions editor, which means it's my job to provide you with great journalism that makes your journey to and from work as enjoyable as possible. I can't prevent train delays or guarantee you won't get caught in the rain, but I can make sure you're up to date with the best of the Telegraph every morning and evening. And I just wanted to let you know about one of the ways you can get all that in audio form. All you need to do is join my WhatsApp group. Every weekday, my colleague Chris Price and I bring you short audio briefings directly to your smartphone at 8 in the morning and 5:30 in the afternoon. And the best bit? It's completely free to sign up and easy. Just click on the link in the show notes for this episode. I look forward to having you as a group member soon.
So we've heard from a Tory MP who's not scared of a no deal. There's no denying which side of the party he's on. Well, former Justice Secretary David Gauke is here. He's one of the 21 Tory MPs who had the whip withdrawn when he voted to block a no-deal Brexit. David Gauke, welcome to Chopper's Brexit podcast.
I'm very pleased to be here.
Can I ask a question which is on the minds of many people here? Why do you hate Brexit?
I don't hate Brexit.
Okay.
I voted against Brexit. I voted to remain, but the vote went the other way. I believe Brexit should be implemented, but I think it should be done in such a way that we maintain access to European markets, that we continue to have security cooperation, that we have a sensible arrangement in Northern Ireland that doesn't involve a hard border, and that we continue to have the flow of goods across the island of Ireland. So I don't hate Brexit. It is true. I think a no-deal Brexit would be very bad for the country.
Because you were a researcher for Barry Legg, weren't you? In the
I
old
was,
days?
yeah.
Barry Legg formed the Bruges Group. You've been on a journey yourself, haven't you, on
Well,
Brexit?
I'm. You've just had a former chairman of the
ERG.
ERG. I'm a former treasurer of the ERG.
Who knew that? Who knew that?
It was, to be fair, a somewhat different organisation to the one that Jacob chaired, but very much on the Eurosceptic part of the party. I was never a leaver, but look, in terms of the concern about a European superstate, I completely shared that. I've always been strongly opposed to membership or the UK's membership of the single currency. I think actually the project of the euro itself is deeply flawed. But I do believe that if we were to leave the EU without a deal, our economy would be weaker, the integrity of the United Kingdom would be more fragile, and I think there are some security concerns as well, which can sometimes be overlooked.
Do you feel welcome here amongst
Well,
Tory members? I mean, in this tent, you're very welcome, but
well,
you feel welcome
so far,
generally
so
welcome.
good. I mean, and look, as you will have seen, people like Jacob and I get on very well. We have some fundamental disagreements, but look, I've been a member of the Conservative Party since my first week at university, where I joined the party. I've been a Conservative MP for 14 years and a frontbencher for 12 of those. I consider this to be my party, but the Conservative Party needs to be a broad church. It needs to represent a range of views. It must not become a narrow party. I think our tone needs to be consistent with our historical traditions, and which is very much the tone that Jacob was setting today. And I want centre-right politics in this country to flourish and succeed.
Are you still a member of the party?
I'm still a member of the party, yes.
Not going to join the Lib Dems like other...
I'm not going to be joining the Liberal Democrats.
Oh, what do you...
I can assure you of that.
Yeah, give a round of applause for that, why don't you? Has Brexit set everyone a bit mad in the party, do you think? Or in the country?
I don't know whether a bit mad, but it's definitely changed the atmosphere of British politics. The referendum itself has changed that atmosphere, and there are disagreements amongst friends, within families, and within political parties. And what I do worry about, to be candid with you, is that we are in a position where everybody is becoming, if you like, more polarized, that positions are becoming harder, less flexible. So a position of wanting to leave the European Union is very often moved into a position of now wanting to leave
altogether,
without a deal, without any kind of relationship. For some people, not for everybody, but for some people, equally a position of, well, we reluctantly have to leave with a deal becomes, well, let's just revoke Article 50. That's not where I am. And I think in the end, as a country and indeed as a party, we are going to have to unify ourselves. But it's not happening at the moment. And I worry about the trajectory of the party, and I worry about the trajectory of British politics, that we're becoming more divided almost by the week.
Well, what's your way back into the party? Would you vote for the Queen's speech on if it happens on October the 14th, as we think it will happen?
Well, I'll wait to see what's in it. I would very much hope I will be voting for
It'll
the
probably
Queen's
commit
speech.
to leaving with a deal, won't it?
Well, that's why I need to see what is in it. Look, my position is honour the referendum result by leaving, yes, but we in Parliament need to find a sensible and practical way in which we can do that.
Yes.
That doesn't have the detrimental effect that a no-deal Brexit would have. And if there is a way in which, if that deal is presented to the House of Commons, I will support it. But an absolute commitment to leaving with no deal, if that is the price, if you like, for readmission, that's not a price that I feel I can, in all conscience, pay.
And should ERG members be sacked if they refuse to vote for a deal?
I don't think they should, myself.
It's very generous of you.
No, I'm not sort of persuaded by that argument. I think you can be a Conservative member of Parliament and take a different view on some of these European issues. So I, for one, was never calling for people like Jacob or anybody else, or even the hardcore Spartans who voted against MV3.
That's ERG members.
The ERG hardcore, if you like. I don't think that their position was incompatible with being a Conservative, nor do I believe that the position that leaving without a deal is a bad thing to do and would be the worst outcome for the country should be incompatible with being a Conservative. And can I just make one point on Jacob? I know Jacob's left, and I'm grateful for his very generous remarks. But one area where I do have to differ, the vote on the 3rd of September was not, in truth, a vote of no confidence.
It was described as such by the
government. It was
government.
described by the government. But what happens in a vote of no confidence is that if the government loses, the government falls.
Yes.
The government evidently lost, and it evidently didn't fall. It wasn't a vote of no confidence.
Do you think we'll have a third Tory leader in 1 year this year?
I don't know. I'm not sure that I'd be surprised. I mean, I think there's some big choices for the Prime Minister to make in the weeks ahead. I would prefer him to achieve a practical deal that can get through the House of Commons, and I would very much want to support that. At the moment, I'm not optimistic that we will. And then I think the Ben Act provisions will be triggered, and I think the Ben Act provisions will work.
Yeah,
and the Prime Minister
it can't be
will
got round. It's watertight.
I don't think it can be got round. I can see reasons why government ministers would want to hint that there is some clever, cunning plan. It avoids you then answering the next question, which is, well, so you're going to abide by the law and seek an extension, are you not? So it avoids them having to answer that question. But in reality, the Ben provisions, the Ben Act will work, and the Prime Minister will seek an extension.
What do you fear more, a no-deal Brexit or Jeremy Corbyn in number 10?
I fear both.
Because embracing no deal could give you the majority to keep Corbyn out of number 10.
I worry that delivering no deal will create the chaotic circumstances in which a hard left government, a hard left Labour Party could win a majority. I fear that we would destroy our economic credibility in much in the same way that the ERM destroyed our economic credibility and leave open the opportunity of Corbyn winning elections. So sometimes it is set out, it is framed as either it's a no-deal Brexit or it's Corbyn. I worry a no-deal Brexit leads to Corbyn.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions here from the audience? There's a chap in the front row.
Thank you, Mr. Gauke. It's Aaron Gomez from the Chelsea Young Conservatives. Just wanted to ask you, companies often try to make deals with other companies and they just can't get it done. They spend a long time negotiating and they walk away at some point and they do go their own way or find another deal or whatever. Is there any point where you could see yourself, if we do extend, eventually potentially supporting no deal if we simply cannot get a deal? Because it has already been 3 years. Do you want it to be 6 years, 9 years? How long do we negotiate for until you finally say, actually, enough's enough, let's try something else?
Great question.
Well, I think in terms of... we had a deal. We had a deal earlier this year, and we could have taken it and we could have been out by now and could have been out some time ago. I think we have to understand I'm afraid that what is stopping a deal being reached at the moment is not a lack of leverage. We have got two objectives in terms of Northern Ireland that at the moment appear to be incompatible. We, on the one hand, want Northern Ireland to leave the customs union because we want the United Kingdom to leave the customs union, but we also want to ensure that there is no hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. And we have, as yet, not come forward with proposals to find a way in which we can square that circle. And it's not illegitimate for the European Union to say, well, come forward with your proposals, or alternatively, stay in the customs union until you have got those workable proposals. Now, that is the one issue that is stopping us from getting a deal at the moment. And, in my view, either we come forward with workable proposals or we agree that we will come forward with those workable proposals. But until that point, we stay within the customs union. And I think that is a way in which we could leave the European Union. We could leave the European Union very quickly, but that's not what we're doing, and I regret that.
Okay, next question, sir.
Hi, Phil Chadwick from Celebridge and Hyde.
Hi, Phil.
We're not a member of the European Union, and knowing what you know now about the European Union, the fact that 4 years ago, during the referendum debate, Nigel Farage mentioned about the EU army and Nick Clegg debunked it. If we were to join the European Union, we'd have to join the euro. Under those circumstances, we're not a member of the European Union. Would you campaign to join or stay out?
Would you rejoin the EU after Brexit?
I think it'd be. I would worry a great deal if we were to leave, and then there's a question: well, should we return? I think. Oh, if we'd never been in it, it's really hard to look at that hypothetically. I think the UK benefited and continues to benefit very substantially from access to European markets because we are members of the single market, which was, after all, a Margaret Thatcher initiative. And that was economically good for us. It's not sustainable to stay in the European Union if it doesn't have public support, and it wouldn't be sustainable to join the European Union without public support. But I don't want us to join the euro. I wouldn't want us to sign up to a European army. Were we to rejoin, there would be issues to do with the rebates. But on the sort of pure merit, so let me put it this way, and I know this will not necessarily be a popular view, but when we joined the European Common Market in the early 70s, we were the sick man of Europe. We were a very unsuccessful country. And in the period since, for a number of reasons, not least what Margaret Thatcher did as Prime Minister in the 1980s, we got to 2016 as one of the most successful countries within Europe. Now, whatever you might say about the European Union, how much credit you give to the EU or not, being a member of the EU did not prevent us from being successful, from taking the measures that we needed to transform ourselves as a country from the sick man of Europe in 1973 to a really successful country. So I'm not someone, I'm not at all embarrassed about the fact that I voted Remain. I think there are many advantages about membership of the European Union, but as the British people have voted for us to leave, we should do that, but do that in a way that maintains as many as possible of the advantages of EU membership, not throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Do you want a referendum?
No, I don't want a referendum.
No.
I want us to go straight to a deal and then leaving. And the issue with a referendum, it would be divisive. I don't know whether it would be decisive. So that's not where I want us to go. I worry that if Parliament cannot get behind a deal, if Parliament can't get us out of the deadlock, then we are moving in the direction of a second referendum. It's not what I want, but I think that is the direction we're going in.
Final question, lady there in the polka dot blouse.
Jackie from Canterbury. If my memory serves me correctly, in the 70s, we were the sick man of Europe because of socialism and the unions. Now, Mr. Gauke, your actions voting against the government, some people might say, handed the keys of number 10 to Jeremy Corbyn. Are you really, really prepared in the near future to do anything that would give the keys of number 10 to a worse Marxist than we had? I mean, Harold Wilson and Callaghan and Healy have nothing on this man.
You give him the key of number 10 to Corbyn, the question was.
Well, I completely agree with you that Jeremy Corbyn is of a different order to Harold Wilson or Jim Callaghan and is a huge threat to this country and our prosperity. And what we saw in Brighton last week was utterly terrifying. And it is a great pity that there hasn't been more focus on what we heard out of Brighton last week. My argument in terms of a no-deal Brexit is that I worry a great deal that a no-deal Brexit provides an opportunity for Jeremy Corbyn. The Conservative Party wins millions of votes because we are the party of economic competence. We know how to run things. We ensure that we keep order. We keep the show on the road. The Conservatives are the party of business, of stability, of certainty. And if we pursue a policy, and my word, we would own a no-deal Brexit, because it is no doubt that it is the Conservative Party that would have been responsible for a no-deal Brexit. If we were to do that, and it is anything like as bad as some of the, well, if you like, almost the consensus view as to what is likely to happen in terms of the impact on the economy. And this is not just the short-term disruption, but in the longer term as well. If we were to be held responsible for that, we would be out on our ear at the next general election, and that provides an opportunity to Jeremy Corbyn that I, for one, simply do not want to see.
David Gauke, thank you. It's been really interesting here. Have them coming into the podcast. Do stay there, David, everyone. Thank you, David Gauke. Thank you to Jacob Rees-Mogg, Camilla Tominey for coming today. Thank you to PLMR, the Westminster-based communications agency, for their support with this marquee. You can listen back to the audio of this podcast tomorrow. If you enjoyed the show, please tell your friends about it, send it to a family member, and do tweet using the hashtag Choppers Brexit Podcast, David, and subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please tweet us at Brexit Broadcast or email us choppersbrexitpodcast@telegraph.co.uk. Finally, if you're in London on Saturday, do come along to a live podcast event I'm doing called Podcast Live. I'll be interviewing Jacob Rees-Mogg's successor as chairman of the European Research Group of Tory MPs, Steve Baker. Go to podcastlive.com for tickets and use the code CHOPPER10, all capitals, to get 10% off. But most importantly, always buy your copy of the Daily Telegraph. Until next time, cheerio!